Here's some of the fundamental problems I see with the American media. There are no uniform standards among news outlets, no clear line between news and opinion, no universal rules of professional conduct for journalists, no particular experience required. Look at Chuck Todd, Chris Cuomo, George Stephanopoulos. These are not professional newsmen. And no commitment to objectivity. You can hardly distinguish between news and opinion. The mass media is overwhelmingly left-wing and overwhelmingly pro-Democrat Party. I think this presidency has demonstrated that more than ever before. They hate President Trump. They hate his supporters. Even more broadly, they're very cynical about our founding principles, capitalism, national sovereignty. They love Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, 29 years old and dumb as a doorknob, but they keep promoting her. And I notice some conservatives do too. The Obamas, Barack and Michelle, Bernie Sanders, leftists, democratic socialists and their agendas. They're very protective of them. They never really seriously question people who advance college for all, health care for all, a minimum income for all, and so forth and so on. So the result is what? Old-fashioned yellow journalism. It's an old term that applied to Hearst and some of the newspapers in New York that duked it out, and they had these very broad headlines that would attract people's eyes. They were sensationalistic. They were scandal newspapers, and very unprofessional and very unscrupulous. So that's what we have today. Here's the problem. That First Amendment there is for a reason. It's not for Time Warner. It's not for Comcast. It's not for the New York Times Corporation or the Washington Post Corporation or any of the rest of them. It's for you and me. These entities didn't even exist when the First Amendment was adopted with the other 9. Freedom of speech and freedom of the press go hand in hand. And when you have almost a monopolistic pack mentality, groupthink, in the mass media, in the major media, it undermines a republic. Look at it as free speech. If speech pretty much only went one way, you wouldn't have a free society, now would you? The consequence is lousy reporting. Grabbing onto anything you can in order to besmirch your targets. Inaccurate reporting. And then when somebody calls you out, like the president or anybody else, you're said to be attacking freedom of the press. Actually, they're the ones destroying freedom of the press. The mass media are committed in this country to sabotaging this presidency, and that undermines this republic. I'm not talking about tough, aggressive reporting. I'm talking about advocacy. That's what I'm talking about. And so you have the BuzzFeed situation. You have the Covington situation. You have the Kavanaugh situation. You have endless false reporting about the president and Russia, about his children and Russia. And so they issue their apologies and their corrections, if they issue their apologies and corrections, and they move on. You look at lawyers, like them or not, there are rules of professional conduct. There are rules of professional conduct. You look at doctors, they have more tests and more requirements than any other profession. Electricians, in order to be licensed, plumbers, in order to be licensed, you have to know certain things. You have to practice certain things. There has to be standards. There has to be standards. We have standards throughout our society for all kinds of jobs. Some are white collar, some are blue collar, some are no collar. Except journalism. Journalism. You can come out of politics, you can come off a president's staff, you can come off Capitol Hill. And if somebody says you're a journalist or you're an anchor, then you're a journalist and you're an anchor. And what's lost in all this? Objectivity. Now, these people will self-servingly tell you that we can still be objective. But as they say, the proof is in the pudding, and they're not. The proof is in the pudding, and they're not. And so we get what we get. And in my view, we're back to yellow journalism. Or let me put it this way, and I think I'll say this on Hannity if I remember. The fourth estate has become the fifth column. The fourth estate, the media, has become the fifth column, undermining the country from within. That, in a thumbnail sketch, is what's taking place in this country, in my humble opinion. I hope these words are taken down by my friend at Right Scoop, by CR, and placed on their sites, because I feel this is fundamentally the issue. And the bias moves almost monopolistically in one direction. I'll give you an example. The Democrats demand 10 years of Donald Trump's tax returns. We hear this endlessly. Okay, what about 10 years of the Speaker of the House's tax returns? I mean, she's the Speaker of the House. She's in charge of legislation, appropriation bills that come out of the House of Representatives. How about 10 years of her tax returns and her husband? They're worth tens of millions of dollars. No. Why bother? Doesn't matter. You well know, you listen to this show and you watch other shows that have made the point of showing the hypocrisy, the flat-out hypocrisy of the Democrats on the issue of immigration over the years. How many of these media outlets have pointed that out? Maybe in passing. But when Nancy Pelosi says not $1 for the wall, why don't they show where Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and down the list supported not $1 but $50 billion? When their favorite Democratic socialists come up with their cockamamie schemes of free health care, of free college, of a minimum government-subsidized income for every American, and their other schemes and plans, why don't the media talk about the debt that we have? Why don't the media talk about the impossibility of funding these projects? Why don't the media talk about how they'll bankrupt Medicare? But they don't. And they won't. Because they agree with the agenda. Because they're not seeking objectivity. In the least. And they're very tolerant of violence on the left. Antifa. They said very little about Antifa, maybe in passing here and there. Antifa is a violent left-wing militia, which trains its members to hurt people. And yet, the media had to be confronted by people like me, dragging and kicking, to acknowledge this fact. Martin Luther King's birthday was yesterday. One Democrat politician after another, and their surrogates, accused the president of being a racist, accused his supporter of being racists. This is on CNN and MSNBC. No pushback whatsoever. 63 million people voted for this president. 63 million people. He won the presidency. and yet he's a racist, and the people who supported him are racist. And the media are not only happy to report it, they promote it. And they continue to bring on, as contributors on cable news, people who make these statements. What about the growing hate and anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party, including among elected members? I've been banging that drum here for a long time now. And it's growing on the left. Big time, in a big way. How many news stories have been done on this subject on CNN and MSNBC, or anywhere for that matter, in the mass media? None? Maybe one? I know my buddy Hannity mentions it all the time on his Fox show. How about the newsrooms? How many newsrooms have done a story on that for any of the cable channels or any of the networks? Few, if any, as far as I can tell. How do we hold the media accountable? Well, ladies and gentlemen, there is a First Amendment. We do support the Bill of Rights. We do support our Constitution. And short of suing an organization or a particular reporter for libel, and if you're a public figure, that's a very high bar, given the Supreme Court decision in New York Times versus Sullivan. The only way you can hold the media accountable is to turn a blind eye to those organizations, the media corporations that disrespect you, that attack your values, that reject objectivity, and that are seeking to sabotage a duly elected president. You know which groups they are. You know which individual journalists they are. That's how we do it. And also by creating competition, whether on the internet or elsewhere. As technology changes, we embrace it and we use it to advance the cause of liberty. That word, liberty, that's what it's all about. And you'll never hear it on CNN, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, or NBC.
Mark Levin.